So, in my last video, I talked about the ranks in the PvP season for the recent PvP update, and I said that this is based on the amount of wins you have and the amount of losses that you have. However, that's actually not the case. As it turns out, these ranks are actually based on Elo. So, actually, yes, Elo is in Tower Defense Simulator, and, I mean, technically speaking, this is a public way of showing off your Elo. It's just that it's not really clear how this is related to Elo, and many people think that this is related to the amount of wins that you have, which, I mean, it kind of is the case, but as you can see here, some people have like 12 wins, 0 losses, some people have 4 wins and 1 loss, and yet, look at their rank. Their rank is much higher than certain people who have like ranks that are like 14 wins and 0 losses, for example, right? You'd expect this person to be a higher rank than these two people here. However, as it turns out, Elo in Tower Defense Simulator, I reckon, is pretty busted. Now, has this person hacked to get to general, at least general 1, because it's actually the same rank? I don't think so. I would be very surprised if it is the case that he's done that. Also, I can't lie, I don't ever remember there being a major rank here, because this is silver and then all the other ranks are gold. I don't remember that upon the release of this update, but yeah, fair enough. So, as you might expect, if you win games, you're more than likely to gain Elo, and if you lose games, you are more than likely to lose Elo. And if you were to quit games before you were to lose, you'd also lose Elo. I don't think it's any different compared to actually losing the game outright, and it doesn't actually count as a loss if you were to quit the game before you were to lose. However, it has the same effect on your Elo, plus you don't get any rewards for EXP and coins, so I don't think it's worth it to quit just to preserve the loss state, given the fact that you're going to lose Elo anyways. And as stated previously in my other video, you can only get Elo in ranked matches, and you can only lose Elo in ranked matches as well. However, as Menton states here, there are cases where winning actually loses Elo, and losing gives you Elo. Now, I reckon that this is because of the way that, I guess, the game ranks you, or ranks you amongst other players. I'm probably going to have to visualize this on screen right now, but imagine, right, everyone in Tower Defense Simulator has 600 Elo. I think that's the case when it comes to chess.com, right? So, if everyone was like 600 Elo, and you, a 600 Elo player, were to verse another 600 Elo player, that's perfectly balanced, so I'd assume you would lose, and you, like, say, 20 Elo if you were to lose the match, and you would gain 20 Elo if you were to win that match, and same for the other person, except, obviously, there can be only one outcome. You lose 20 Elo, and the other person gains 20 Elo, or you gain 20 Elo, and the other person loses 20 Elo. However, in Tower Defense Simulator, I think Elo is busted where some players, they're being matched against much higher Elo ranked players. Because the problem is, with PvP mode, because it's so new, I'd assume not everyone has time to like build up their Elo. This therefore means that, imagine early on, right, you have, like, I assume it starts off with 0 Elo. In fact, I think it does start off with 0 Elo, right? So if a 0 Elo player were to verse another 0 Elo player, and then the game were to conclude that you would win, you'd gain, like, I don't know, I think you gain about 100 Elo, right? And then the other person, they can't really lose Elo, but I guess you can go into negative Elo. I don't actually know how that works if you have 0 Elo and then you were to lose a game. However, imagine, right, the next game, another level 0 or level 0 Elo player, they were to verse that level 100 Elo player, because there's like only one other person in the game with like 100 Elo, right? And like having more than like 0 Elo is also quite rare. It means that if the person with 0 Elo were to win that game, they would gain a massive amount of Elo because of how underdog you are. That's how Elo works. It contributes to underdogs more compared to if you were like expected to win. So for example, someone with 1000 Elo versus someone with 0 Elo, the 1000 Elo person is expected to win. However, it comes to the point where I think in certain games, if you were to do like 18 wins, for example, straight wins, and then you were to encounter someone with 0 wins, that person with 0 wins would have 0 Elo. Therefore, if that person with 0 Elo were to get an unexpected win against that person with 1000 Elo, not only would that person with 1000 Elo lose a majority of its Elo, they would also contribute to that level 0 person gaining a lot of Elo. In fact, probably to the point where it might shoot you up all the way to General 1. Now, I speculate that's what happens here. This person with 4 wins and 1 loss, okay, maybe the 1 loss is expected against a level 1000. If it's not based on the amount of levels that you have, it's based on the amount of Elo that you have. So perhaps they lost against someone with like a billion elo or something, hence why they still are up here depending on the amount of losses they have. But maybe the amount of wins that they have were unexpected wins against people with 1,000 elo, for example. Hence why they got shut up. And then this person up here, even though they have 12 wins compared to some people with like 28 wins or 15 wins with 0 losses as well compared to their 12 wins, maybe these 12 wins were against players that they were expected to lose against massively. And as mentioned previously, there is a chance that if you have a high amount of elo and you were to face someone with a low amount of elo, you would still actually lose elo even if you were to win the game. Now, that makes no sense, you may think. However, the best example that I can really think of for this is when the FIFA rankings were introduced and then they were modified for the 2010 World Cup. What would happen is that if you were to play more teams, more weaker teams, more often, you would actually harm your FIFA rankings. This is for football, by the way, FIFA being Fédération Internationale Football Association, because of the way that the scores were calculated at the end of like every accounting month. So I do believe what happened was a team, Romania, they figured this out. If they played the least amount of teams, even if they were weaker teams that they knew they would easily beat, the less amount of teams that they actually faced, the higher their ranking is in FIFA. Now, I'm aware that the FIFA rankings aren't exactly elo based, but in Tower Defense Simulator, it's the same case. If you're a level 100 elo player, for example, which actually would just give you Private 1, so not a good example. So a level 1000 elo player, which I think is somewhere around the lieutenant's range. If you were to face someone with like 0 elo, you are expected to win by so much that if you were to play the game, you might actually lose elo against that level 0 elo player. Conversely, if you're a level 0 elo player and you verse someone with like 10 billion elo, there is a chance, and in fact there's a high chance, that even if you lose the game, because you're expected to lose the game and quite a significant amount, you actually would get some elo by losing. Now obviously, if you were to win that match in the unlikely circumstance that you'd gain a massive amount of elo, probably to the point where you probably rank up halfway across the PvP season. And then if you were to rank perfectly with someone with like equal elo, there is a chance that you would get some elo and it would actually contribute to your rank. So when I said that when I beat someone, I actually got a little amount, like 0 elo, that's actually not the case. You actually do get a little amount of elo. In fact, you could lose a little amount of elo for the stated reasons that I've stated previously. But here, Mentin, they won a match, for example, and then as you can see, their progress bar increased by a little amount. Well, actually, this isn't Mentin, but this is apparently someone who is Sergeant 2. So it could be like any one of these players here. I think like one of the 49 players or one of actually 5 players, because the top 3 have a different rank to these. But actually, it's the case where your ranks are based on the amount of elo that you have. So, for example, Private 1, your elo rank is between 0 and 199. Your Private 2 rank is between 200 and 399 elo. Private 3 is between 400 and 599 elo. Sergeant 1 is between 600 and 799 elo. Sergeant 2 is between 800 and 999 elo. Sergeant 3 is between 1000 and 1199 elo. Lieutenant 1 is 1200 to 1399 elo. Lieutenant 2 is 1400 to 1599 elo, and then so on and so forth up until like General 3, which I don't even know I don't want to think about what its elo requirements are, like maybe 3000, right? The only problem is I don't think elo should be used for your rank in Tower Defense Simulator PvP mode, because what happens if you have the misfortune, right, of being like a 2000 elo rated player, right? And then you were to face someone with 100 elo, with the chance that you will lose elo, and in fact there's a very high likelihood that you would lose elo even if you were to win that game. It is extremely luck based that when it comes to elo rankings, you are basically praying that firstly you're paired with a higher ranked elo player in Tower Defense Simulator, but then you're also banking on the fact that they lose and you win and therefore gain a lot of elo, or they are such a high ranked elo player that even if you do lose, you actually can still progress through your season pass. And then when it comes to the majority of players, because we're ranked probably similarly to how everyone else plays, and I don't know how the inflation of elo actually occurs after like a certain amount of time, it turns out that you'll get stuck basically at your rank because you're gaining like a little amount of elo here and there. Like as you saw with that screenshot, many players, they look like they only gain like 10 elo maybe per game. And that's if you win it. If you lose a game, if the other person was the underdog in that game and you were to lose, then you'd lose a massive amount of elo, and you can actually lose rank. Some players have said that actually it's not possible to lose your rank. That's not true. As you can see here, I'm Private 2. I'm now Private 1. Yes, I've lost a rank. Barely, as you can see here. I'm actually I'm like more than 80% of the way to the next rank, the rank that I was at. But definitely, you can lose ranks. And that's what I hate about elo. Firstly, you can't see what your elo score actually is. You have to just know that it's between a certain amount depending on the rank that you are. Secondly, how elo works is extremely unfair to the rewards that you get. Again, if you were to get high-ranked elo players, much higher than you, there is a chance that even if you lose the game, you get a massive amount of elo, and then if you are ranked against elo players that are lower than you, there is a chance that even if you win the game, you lose elo. And I don't think that's the case. I think with the ranked things here, and especially when it comes to the rewards, I think it should be based on the amount of wins that you have rather than the amount of elo that you have, because certainly it's a bit unfair that some players may never get the opportunity to get like General 3 rewards purely because of the players that they're put up against. And that's even the case if it's based on like the amount of wins that you have and the amount of losses that you have, because, well, randomly you might get paired up against players that are already weaker than you. But as I mentioned previously, you are unable to actually quit the game without getting a punishment. So again, even if you realize that you're losing and your teammate is quite bad, or your teammate has actually disconnected, you're still going to lose elo. So in that regard, I think PvP is a little bit unfair, and especially the elo ranking, I don't think it should be used for this PvP ranking overall. I think it should be something slightly different. But hey, what do you know? Maybe the developers will fix it, or they'll fix how the elo equation works so that you never lose elo even if you were to win the game.